Okay, guys, welcome back to another episode of the pod. Today is a topic that is near and dear to our hearts. We're going to talk about, are we failing our boys? What are the secrets to raising good men? We both have kids, they're all boys. We have 3 boys between us, and we'd love to talk about this. But before we start, we just want to ask you guys to like and subscribe. We do put a lot of effort and our heart into this, and we would love for your support so that we can continue to make great content. And just to jump into this, I think society nowadays is very different, even compared to how we grew up as kids. So the question that I'd like to present and would love your thoughts on, Peter, is how can we navigate a cutthroat society where it's like a dog eat dog world? And how do we prep our boys to compete ethically and fairly in this kind of society?
Yeah, I feel I love capitalism. I'm 100% for capitalism. I think one of the ugly sides of capitalism is that there are people, some people say it's a zero-sum game. There's winners and there's losers. And some people, believe that this society can run continuously by being very competitive and being in this capitalistic society. And so the problem that I am seeing is that there are just people who are taking. There's big corporations who are taking, just constantly people trying to take in this world. And really, it's people are just trying to survive. Ideally, it would be really great to have a society where we're all just very generous, right? A beautiful way to do capitalism is to have voluntary generosity, right? And so people from the top handing out to the people at the bottom. That would be the most ideal thing. Communism, it's forced, right? It's like, hey, you have to share. And that's kind of one of their bases. And so I think it's a tricky thing because like we want our boys to be able to survive well in the society, and it's just becoming more competitive. You have to kind of be a certain competitiveness and cutthroatness in order to be able to survive. And that's where I've been feeling like, okay, how do I prepare my son to survive without obviously compromising integrity, to compromise being mean or hurting people. Because quite honestly, if we look at societies like Korea is very cutthroat, right? And there's tons of shortcutting. There's tons of stepping on people's heads. That is actually the norm in Korea. And we don't want that kind of society. But yeah, so what is that balance? And so for me, I definitely believe that you have to be pretty protective about your family and yourself, because if you don't, people are going to walk all over you. I think for both of us, we're nice guys. I genuinely believe that you are a very kind person, like a nice person. I think for me, I lived in kind of a naive bubble when I was young, where it's like I wanted to be so generous. I wanted to be so loving to people. And what happened was a lot of people started taking advantage of me. And you probably experienced the same,
Sure.
right? It's like that kindness, that niceness. There are many people who will reciprocate that kind of kindness, but there's also a lot of people who will take advantage of your kindness. So I've learned to kind of protect myself. And so for me, I personally, I think the first point would be to teach my kid that, hey, it's okay to be kind. It's okay to be nice, but also you need to set your boundaries. You have to set you have to protect yourself as well. Make sure that people don't take advantage of you, because there are people like that, and learning how to identify people like that. Because if they do that, then you have to either break away from the relationship, or you have to fight for what you believe is fair, right? So yeah, what do you think about the topic?
There's a lot to unpack there. I think that right now, culturally, we're dealing with a lot of equality, inequality things. And even going back to, trying to reverse like very big court decisions, about major issues, like not even just about this, but about abortion or the way we have, we educate our kids in the classroom. So there's a lot of big kind of upheavals. And I think when I talk to my friends about these topics, it's very emotionally charged because it's just a very sensitive topic and that's near and dear to all of us. But in terms of the boys, in terms of the topic that we're talking about today, I just struggle to let go of the values that I believe are timeless, whether or not we are in some sort of a cultural bubble, which we are. I think really fundamentally, the question is, what do you believe about comfort and discomfort? At the end of the day, not to be morbid, but we're not going to be here forever, right? What is the right balance of the comfort or the discomfort I engineer for my own kids so that they experience the right kind of adversities, but then they also have the right kind of love and support? It's like the classic example is I'll put my kid through a lot of stuff, whether it's through sports or I need you to write this, or we just talked about last night. We talked about he was complaining about school. He's like, most days are like this. And I'm like, okay, we got to dig into this now. So I told him to write down all of his things that he was not happy with. He made 4 bullet points. And I said, we're going to put an action plan to each of these because this is just complaints.
I like that.
These are just complaints floating around in your head, but we must now convert them to an action that you can help yourself with. Because I saw him kind of blaming others and it's her fault or my teacher's fault that I don't get to do anything. All these things that I noticed. And then at the end of the day, to touch on the topic of masculinity, I think that's also being redefined as well. And I'm curious to think, what is your take on what masculinity maybe looked like before and what the modern day definition is of masculinity?
When you say before, I mean, if you're talking about kind of when we grew up and the way we saw our parents, I can speak on that. I don't know about the 80s or the 70s, right? We were just born, right? In the 80s, just to be very clear, not the 70s. We're 20, so anyway, don't fact check us on that.
In the mind.
But I definitely feel like masculinity has changed over time, seeing the way my father was, which to be honest, my dad was a very masculine figure. And he actually stood out in that sense. And so seeing like my father and the stark contrast of like most men here today, I think one of the things that I think clearly shows up is like even just the mental toughness, the ability to be tenacious, right? I think that has certainly changed. I think when there's a lot of when there's any adversity, a lot of men tend to, or a lot of boys or men or teenagers, they tend to just scurry back and they tend to kind of just give up very quickly. And I saw my dad kind of be very, like I've learned from him, which is why I'm pretty tenacious, is that he would just continue to fight through adversity. I'll give you an example. He loves fishing, big fisherman. He would be out there. Most kids like me, for me, like I would give up in like 30 minutes of not catching a fish. My dad would be there for literally all day, like 10 hours. He'll be out there fishing, believing that he's going to catch a fish. And what that taught me was, okay, life is, you have to be tenacious to get anything. There's like this picture, I don't know if you've seen it online, where it's like you see 2 people digging through a tunnel, and then like right at the end, it only takes like a few more digs to be able to get the bucket of diamonds. But then you see this person walking back, and you see this person just continuing, and it's really that person who just stays tenacious enough to be able to get those diamonds. They're the winners of the society. And so one thing I want to teach my son is that tenacity, and the grit. I think that's really important. I also feel something I'm not saying anything about this. Like I don't have any comments, but one thing I do notice is that a lot of men became a lot more, I don't know what the right word is, but like domesticated in a certain way. Like I definitely see a difference between my dad's society and even my father-in-law's, the way their culture was, where the men would work and the woman would do like seriously everything else. Men would be the provider.
Yep.
Woman would do everything else. It's not a bad thing. I'm just saying that is what I've seen, where it's like there were traditional roles. The mother would be the more nurturing role, and the men would just be the provider of the household, the disciplinarian in many ways. And I feel like that kind of shifted a little bit, where a lot of men, it's kind of like mixed. Now, women are working more and men are now, raising the kids more, or like doing more household stuff than they used to. And so I think when it comes to masculinity, again, like you have to define what that is, but I feel like there's a shift in what that definition is, or what masculinity is, and what also how people are being less of the masculine, and so like it's just kind of interesting to see the shift that's happening. And the question is like, what is right? What is the right amount of masculinity? What is masculinity? How do we be more masculine? Is that a good thing? Or is being masculine, which is associated with also like domestic violence, or like, being too like bully-like, or, there's a lot of associations now with masculinity, and what's the word now? They say toxic masculinity.
Sure, yeah.
Which I get. Like, I understand the concept. There is toxicity in that, like, overly masculine, where, and again, what does that mean? Like, overly masculine? It's more like just being like a bully. Like, yeah, you shouldn't be a bully. You shouldn't be like a, like my way or the highway. But does that mean that the masculinity in itself is something that we should stray away from, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, this conversation could get very, very broad, but I think just to touch on, it's a very important topic for me because I think about this all the time.
You have two boys.
I have two boys, and I see the way that the schools are. It's just different. I'm trying not to judge. I try. I try hard, but sometimes I fail. I look at the way that, for example, school awards are given, right? Report cards, they're different now.
Yeah.
Okay. You guys can look into that if you want. It's just different. The way that they like my kid who's in second grade, they'll have like a list of core values. Some of them are great. It's stuff like be kind and, but some of them I don't necessarily agree with, or I wouldn't have put that as a core value, right? And I will be vulnerable, and I will say one of the things is like just be yourself, and I'm special, right?
What bothers you about that?
I don't agree that should be something that kids. It's almost like you're weighting the individual a bit heavier than the group, right? And that's where, again, that's kind of nitpicking at one thing, but in a broader sense, things are just different. The way things are taught, the way we are signaled on social media or the news. You see men getting sexual harassment cases that are very, very public, that some are valid and some are invalid, but the media coverage of that, I think, is the focus here. We can talk about Johnny Depp or whatever, but the point is that coverage is very, very heavy, and it's not necessarily evidence-based. So the other thing that I want to point to personally is like, where's the boundary where masculinity becomes harmful, right? Like you said, what is the toxic, threshold? I think I think a lot about generational trauma. This is something that's very cultural to Korean people as well. I mean, we always talk about like the concept of Han. My good friends kind of know this, but the concept of Han is this cultural sorrow or pain that we carry as a nation because of all the things that we've been through before. Like the Korean War is a big one, right? Where, a whole nation literally got divided in half. And I read that it was 2 National Geographic guys that submitted a proposal to the government and just said, this is the 38th parallel. We're just going to divide families like this. So all the stuff that happened in our culture gave us this concept of Han. And there are some things that I don't like about that, right? Like, why are we necessarily continuing to give pain when this is a new world? It's kind of like reparations, right? For slavery. Well, it's like today is today, yesterday is yesterday. Where I believe the masculinity gets toxic as a parent, not like man, woman, but as a parent, is because men, we're more likely to default to the state of anger. Like when there's a frustration, anxiety, whatever, negative emotion, it's easy and actually addicting to default to anger. I felt it. We've covered it in our podcast. I'm sure you felt it as well. And that's where I do see where, okay, how do we allow men and in turn boys, because we have to do it first to be able to show our kids, how are we talking about our emotions and feelings in a way that's constructive and therapeutic, right? I know we talk about this a lot because I think we're pretty open to each other, but how do you create kind of a structure to talk about feelings, but not let it get, how do you keep that constructive and how do you create that safe space around that?
Yeah, I think you have some good points in regards to, generational traumas and hurts that I think you said in the last podcast, was it pass-through traumas? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I think it's very similar. Yeah.
Yeah, where it's like your father had hurt from his father,
Right,
and then that goes into me, and then that goes into my son. And I think that's a real thing. I think where this can get very dangerous, the toxic, part of the masculinity is where a lot of men, they're saying, no, I'm just being a man. They're using that as an excuse, but they're actually, what they're really dealing with is emotional traumas. And that emotional trauma is then being passed through, and that's where it's not right. Now, how do you fix that is the question. So your question was, how do you have boys who are soon to be men talk about their feelings? Because by doing that, you create what Stephen Covey talks about in his book, psychological error, right? You have to talk about your feelings. And I know that doesn't sound very masculine, but that's actually the most masculine thing that you can do. That's the most leader type of thing, boss type of thing that you can do. I'm trying to sound young right now. That's the best thing that you can do, because then it allows you to be a healthier version for your family, for your kids, to your parents. And so one thing that we always teach is you have to be able to identify your emotions.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because that's really step number one. You have to take a step back from your own body and be like, okay, I am angry right now, or hey, I am sad. You're feeling certain things, identify the emotion, and then kind of, kind of talk about it. So in the beginning, you said that, was it Leo? Or anyway, one of your kids.
Alex, the older one.
So one of your kids are talking about how he's frustrated about, was it school, right? Mm-hmm. I'm frustrated about school. Okay, let's break it down. So what you're doing, what you did, that exercise was very powerful, and that you've helped them identify their emotions, identify, what's going on first. Okay, what are the actual things, that you're observing? What are the feelings? step number one. And then step number two, I think you did really well. It's a very easy step process where you just tell them, okay, now what are we going to do about it? Because I think step one is great. Identify the emotions, talk about it, kind of work it through to create that psychological relief. But then the second part is, what do we do about it? And I think we as men, I think a lot of women like step number one. But step number two is very important for men because we have to figure out, okay, then how do we change our circumstances in order to make this better? And so I think you did a very good job with your son to cultivate that healthy response to a negative stimulus or a negative experience.
Yeah, one of the things I think a lot about, so I think I mentioned it before, I just read a book about trauma that Oprah Winfrey helped write with a world-renowned, I'm forgetting his name, but it's a world-renowned psychologist. He's been through horrible tragedies, right? Like, do you remember there was a shooting that happened in the 80s or 90s in Waco, Texas? It was the something Davidian, like this guy thought he was God, basically.
Oh.
And they lived in a complex that was hodgepodge, built, without permits. It was a compound.
Oh, wow. It's like that.
Long story short, this is 50 or 70 people, including like 20 to 30 kids, that all believed that this guy was God.
Oh, was it the... Did he
drink poison? That's another one.
That was Jones, something Jones.
Yeah, that's another one.
Yeah.
And this guy, there's a documentary on Netflix, by the way. It is crazy. Anyway. At the end of the day, what happened was it all fell apart, like it always does. There was a massive shootout. The FBI, the ATF, everybody came, shot the place down, flames with kids and adults. They were able to get some kids out, 20 kids out. And then those kids were paired up with a group of like therapists and counselors. And why I was reminded of that story was through having the right kind of people around these kids. They measure the average BPMs or beats per minute of their hearts. So when you're anxious, goes up, right? They measured in these kids that the average BPM of the entire group was like 120 to 130 BPMs.
That's insane.
That's like a jog.
Way high. Yeah.
Kids are normally higher, by the way, but not that high, right?
Yeah.
And then after just being next to the right people and the counselors, not like this, but like, you want to play ball. And then this kid's like, oh, this is an adult that is actually nice and doesn't want anything. Through those interactions and through that kind of community aspect, their average BPM literally measurably came down to like 80 or 90 or whatever the normal, thing is. So it's like when you talk about these techniques to label our emotions, I also think about, okay, what else are we doing to set examples and be the leaders of our family and kids?
Yeah.
I think a lot about community, which you also talk a lot about as well. When we have fellowship, especially at places like church, or it could be an interest group, it could be music, it could be anything. It could be anything it could be a rock climbing, class, right?
Yeah.
When we are able to do that as fathers and leaders of the family, I think kids will naturally follow. And, like, what else do you see as, some outlets or healthy things that you're already doing maybe, or that you can do, or people should think about when they role model this type of behavior for their kids, for boys?
Yeah, the science is there in regards to you really become like the people you're with. It's, right. There's probably multiple studies out there with big sample sizes. And so I think that's really number one is like you have to be around the right people. And so with our kids, I'm sure you deal with this all the time. It's like you have to, it's tough because you don't want to control who your kid hangs out with. But, my parents didn't like some of my friends growing up, to be completely honest. And now what's funny is I actually understand why they did that. It's because, well, if one kid is this kid is doing drugs, or I had one friend who was just very dark. Like if you go to his room, you'd be very surprised. It was like, it was very grungy. This is the Nirvana, the heavy metal stage. And it's like, okay, you have to be careful with people like that. I think the first thing is like, you have to really control your negative influences. The people who can negatively impact your son's, or your, the way you look at things, or the way your personality develops and forms. And so if you have people who are dishonest, or if you have people who are, clearly toxic, being around them will just make you more like that. So I would think that's number one, like to remove the people like that in your life. And I've actually had to do that in my life. Very hard thing to do. But you got to do it. And I don't know if you could do this with your kids, but it's another thing. If like this one parent is doing something very toxic, or it's just a very toxic person, then maybe being around them is not good, because their kids are watching. They're very observant, and they suck and absorb a lot of these experiences and what they see. I also think, just speaking on the negative influences, and then we'll talk about kind of, the influence and how to, help them. Music. I think social media, movies. There's a lot of negative influences in those things. Yeah. And they do 100% influence you. People think, oh, I'm just listening to music. No, you are downloading information into your mind that's going to manifest in the way you view the world, or the way you talk to people, the way you interact with the world. And movies are very powerful. You got the visual, you got the audio. That makes a huge difference. Now, social media, which kids are 100% watching social media now, and they're seeing these people. One of the videos I actually recently did for a short is to really try to teach the algorithm to have positive influences on your life and remove the negative ones. If you're watching people like, I don't know, to be honest, Jake Paul, Logan Paul, some of these kids who I don't think kids should try to be like, to be honest, if you just keep watching them, even though they are entertaining, that's going to like mess with you, right? It's going to mess with who you become, because you're constantly like watching these people. So I think, social media and movies. There are some movies like John Wick, for example. I know that's kind of a violent movie for kids, but one of the things, and sorry to ruin this for you guys, but it's like at the end in the first one, he shoots the guy, right? So he gets the revenge, right, for killing his dog, essentially. And I know that seems like, oh yeah, did the right thing, justice, but it's also teaching people revenge. And I don't know about you, but my experience with revenge has never went well. There's so many people who have done unjust things to me. And when you take revenge like that, like there's justice, but when you personally take revenge like that, it just, what happened in John Wick 2, 3, and 4, it's him running away and killing a bunch of people because of his action. It doesn't go well. And so what may seem innocent actually really influences, people a lot in the way they're thinking. Because we're like, oh, no, John Wick did the right thing, but was it really the right thing? So that's the negative influence part, removing that. And I think just having good, positive influences, like good uncles or good other dad friends, I think is really important. And then the most important of all for us with our kids is like, we have to be good influences, right? We're the number one, the statistics with, like men without fathers, right? It's like, it impacts you, right? Now there are people like, I have a good friend who 100% overcame that by getting good mentors and people like that in their life. But I think, the fathers play such a huge role on their kids. Yes. So how do you be the right example to your kids to positively influence them, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. And I think the point that I also want to piggyback on top of is we are being influenced by our environment every single day and every minute of the day. If we are in, I mean, there's numerous tests and studies that have shown this over time, right? The influence, there is nature and nurture, but it's really a mixture of both. And once you're in the world, I do believe the nurture part has a huge effect on what you eventually become. And I think that if people want to look into this, it's like, there's different brainwave states that you get into when you are just about to sleep, just about to wake up, when you're really into something or you're relaxed and watching something. They've actually done studies on where these commercials or TV shows or movies, they'll get you into this, alpha wave brain state where you're able to download all this information, good or bad, right? So I have kind of gone on a crusade on like, my kids are like, can we watch this? Can we watch this? And I'm like, we're going to watch Mabel McClay. So this is the Bent Key
right.
app.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, I don't. And then they watch it and we're talking about perseverance. When life gives you lemons, make lemonade.
Yeah.
He messed up on something and then he overcame it with kindness. These are all things that kids need to be downloading into their heads. So it's like at a certain point, I'm like, okay, I can't really fight this thing. So I'm just going to have to steer the boat the right way. Like I can't unload everybody on the technology, off the technology boat. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So when my kids do use, this is a very important and sore topic for a lot of parents because we're addicted too. And now the kids see that. They see us on our phones. Yeah. I'm working. I'm researching. I mean, are we really? And sure, some of the times we are. But when my youngest uses his iPad, it's only learning games, for example. When they watch movies and TV, like shows, I want to curate their experience to movies that have value and some sort of a story, like a hero overcoming something, And,
sure.
And you really have to do your research and maybe even watch that movie and kind of revisit, oh, this is not what I thought it was, or this is more of what I thought it should be. So I just wanted to mention that because I know a lot of parents are dealing with that. I know I am. When you talk about finding role models, can you give me some examples of, pretend your son's now, 4, 5, 6. That's kind of the age where they start doing group sports or music or they go to church or whatever, right? How would you curate those influences for them?
I mean, I can only talk about my own experiences because I did have a good community around me. This is a tough one because I know like not all of our listeners are are religious, right? And I'm not really religious myself, but I do believe in God. And I did go to church, and church was very powerful for me. It's actually something very sad where I don't see churches do this as much, where they have these like summer camps, all these, Sunday schools and after Sunday school meetings. And, they even do like church basketball events and, picnic events. And I just feel like there's, and I don't know if we should get into the topic of religion, but it's like, there's something that you have to admittedly say that is a good thing about having that kind of unified community, right? It's for a belief. It's obviously for God, or some people believe in Allah, some people believe in Buddhism or whatever it is. Sure. But just having that community, I feel like is extremely powerful for people to get incredibly good influences. People who typically are, believe in God or Christianity, they typically have good values, right? And so the people that you have around you are people who have good shared values. America was founded upon these values, actually, the Christian values, right? It's like, don't, I forget basically don't do an eye for an eye, right? Don't take revenge. If someone hurts you, don't hurt them back, because they're just going to hurt you again, and then they're going to hurt your family. And it's just like this whole thing. That's a very good value, right? The golden rule. There's, I feel like that's where that community aspect, whatever it is that you guys believe in. I mean, I think Christianity is a great way. I think that can be very helpful for your kids. I know for me, when I was young, having a community of people who believe in those good values, and honestly, I was taught that in Sunday school, those really good values that impacted me until this day. So that would be me. I mean, do you have any thoughts?
I'd agree. I think I also grew up in the church, and I just stopped going to church because I was busy, and now I'm. The main reason why I thought a lot about church was for my kids, because I realized that there was no rudder morally or ethically steering the ship, and I have been relying on just do as I say. Like, just do this.
You are the morality. You are
right. And I can't be that because I'm not good enough to be that thing. I'm not that. I am just a person. And I'm like, well, it's so much less effective and less powerful coming from me because I'm only like an N of one. I'm only one example, right?
Yeah.
And on top of that, as a lot of American families will know, we're not all this, my wife is Chinese. I'm Korean. Well, we're Asian, but there's still a lot of she grew up more Buddhist, right? And anyway, I realized I'm just telling these kids, I'm just shouting at them, literally and figuratively, like do this, be this way. And I realized I'm really losing. I want it to be more effective and be able to steer my family with values. And if you take out all the religious stuff, if you take out maybe the word church or Jesus or God, just as a thought experiment, everything that you see or hear in the Bible are stories of good and bad and how to overcome, and be a better person, how to support your family and friends,
how to provide for your family,
finance
advice,
how not to have, revenge or resentment. Like, who would say no to those things? And yet, because they are linked to, this idea of the religion, I think that's where it's kind of a shame, honestly. So I thought, okay, I can just bullet point these things and not be as effective, or we can, kill three birds with one stone, where we go to a church that has a community aspect where, kids can be kids, but under the right moral and ethical and religious umbrella. Like you talked about sports, man, I used to play volleyball, basketball, soccer with all of my older brothers in Korea. We call them hyungs, right? And they taught me a lot. I I don't want to share some of the stories, but it's like because I was an only child, they were like my older brothers. Hey, you don't do that. Hey, don't tap your feet. That's and I'm like, oh, is that? Right. Yes, yeah. There's all these little things. Hey, don't be nicer to this girl because, listen, pay attention. It's all the stuff that we really need. And I do believe that being inserted or inserting yourself into the right community and environment is the key here.
Let me follow up and ask you this.
Yeah.
What are we seeing in America? We're seeing, men, the distortion of men and how they act and, just not being the men that we would want, the not toxic, but healthy masculinity. We're seeing divorce rates very high right now. We are seeing, health is going down the drain. We're seeing just morality, I feel like, is affected. And we're just seeing a lot of things that are happening in America that aren't happening necessarily everywhere else in the world. America is actually probably at the bottom of the barrel. And there are some things that we're proficient in, but there's a lot of ways where America is just failing as a nation. Let me ask you this. Given that we are seeing these trends in America, but we're also seeing something very apparent, which is we through most of history, 70s, 60s, all the way until the 1800s or 17, whenever we found, or 17s. Anyway, I don't want to get too historical.
What school did you go to?
I went to dumb schools are us. So do you feel that because we've strayed away from our Christian values, right? Which is what founded America, what we were based off. There was pride in it. I mean, do you feel like that could be why we are straying away as like a nation, where we're failing as a nation, why men are struggling with, just the role of being men, and it just all getting distorted?
What's interesting, I just had this talk with my wife, Jessica, a couple days ago, and so I agree, yes, but then I'll explain like a pendulum, right? A pendulum swings this way, and there's a lot of momentum, and it just doesn't stop here. It swings the other way. So I think that we are at a pendulum swing and a shift where we are hopefully we're at the end of this pendulum, where we realize that, okay, we were here. Okay, we don't want domestic violence. We don't want war. Okay. But now we may have swung here to where we're losing some of these values that kept America and, society in check. And I think that it's so palpable. Like, you can feel inflation. You can feel bad influences on social media. You can feel these things kind of corrupting our institutions and systems, that it's not really that hard to talk to people about this, because a lot of people feel this the same way as we do. Maybe not as strongly or whatever, but people feel a general sense of like, we're not doing too well. And I think that's why Trump is doing really well.
Because he represents that, getting him back into that kind of society where it's like American pride.
Yes.
Right? Christian, because I don't know if he's a Christian or not, but
he actually talked about Jesus on a clip yesterday. Like, he was talking about God and Christianity, which was surprising to me, but yeah.
I think it's pretty apparent. So, okay. I mean, again, whatever everyone's political beliefs, we're not, endorsing anybody, but we are just saying that that's what Trump is kind of representing right now.
Yeah, and it's about, I believe and I hope that it's coming down, or at the very least, we feel the need to bring it back to center.
Yeah.
And I do hope that once really, men like us, friends, clients, whatever, as a group or a class of people, recognize that we have to be strong and at the same time be vulnerable and loving, because we are raising kids, especially for us. Like, we have to be that example. To me, there's no other choice. Like, I don't have a choice. I'm here. Like, I'm not going anywhere, right? And I think that hopefully the awareness will increase, and us and other people like us talking about, well, what do we do? Like, how do we actually make this happen? And I think we provided some good points about, we have a problem, we've identified it, what's the solution? Well, there are these solutions, right? I think that's really the way forward, and I hope it spreads like wildfire.
Well, let's talk about, just real quick, elaborate on some of those solutions.
Yeah.
I think men need to, so we talked about tenacity, right? Men need to be tenacious. I also believe men need to be, strong-willed, right? In concurrence with that, it's like we have to be strong-willed. But that also doesn't mean you're not listening to your wife. That also doesn't mean that you're not being empathetic. And
right.
That's one thing that I don't know how I learned this, to be honest, but I've learned to be very empathetic. I had a very strong father. He wasn't very empathetic. I think my mother taught me empathy. Empathy is, I believe, very important for men, because if we don't have empathy, good luck on marriage, right? Good luck on being kind. Good luck on, being caring to other people. You have to have empathy. What is empathy? It's to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And I feel like we've lost that as a society. And so we need to also have that empathy, but also be strong. So have that like balance, right? We have to have kindness, right? And and then we also have to teach them how to have a backbone, right? And so like having integrity, so doing something when no one else is watching, like doing the right thing when someone else is watching, when no one else is watching, resilience, reliability, but then also having that heart, compassion, forgiveness, emotional openness. I think that's some of the elements that we would want for our boys, for our kids, to have. Now, to be able to teach that, we could talk about influences and whatnot. I think the biggest thing is just to be the right example to them. We got to do that, right? So I know you do this with your kids where you're just like, you're trying to make people empathetic. If what your eldest, right, hurts the younger, it's like, okay, why did you do that? Well, he made me do this. It's like, oh, okay. So you got to like make him think. How do you think that makes your younger brother feel when you hit him? Have you ever been hit before? Yeah, I have. Does it feel good? No, right? It's like those kind of mental exercises can help facilitate some of that empathy, right? And I think it's really important. So I think just cultivating these principles, cultivating these exercises, I feel like would be very important for raising our boys right.
I mean, I think that's very well said, and I think maybe that's kind of. I'd like to maybe add one more thing. It's like we're always looking for shortcuts, right? The society is about shortcut. It's even in our words, like a hack or a shortcut. We talk about this stuff all the time. My personal experience is that unless you want to reinvent like morality or philosophy or all these things, like if you want to be Plato or if you want to be Jesus or Muhammad, like that's fine. But my shortcut was realizing that I need and want, I want a template that I can follow as well. I want to be inserted into that kind of environment, right? Like I have different hobbies. Like I race cars. I do this. I do that. I'm into martial arts. But really, for my children who are beginning to build their morality and ethics, that's why I chose to think about church and to go back to church, because it is a shortcut. Because you're not reinventing the wheel; it's already there. I mean, you talk about America is a Christian country. 200% it is, right?
It used to be.
Well, and I
We're
hope
trying to get that. Yeah,
and I hope we can go back to that. But just to revisit it in that kind of lens, where okay, I do believe that America is one of the best countries in the world to live in and to prosper. I think that's a fact. I can get into all this stuff, but I think that's a fact. Opportunity-wise, right? Potential-wise. But we must temper it with, well, how did this nation get started? Well, it's because of the founding fathers and the values, and we came across, not we, but immigrants came across the ocean to avoid persecution and bullying by the government and control. So let's not repeat history, right? And again, for me, that's why I'm giving my kids this kind of, let's be kind to our fathers and mothers and our neighbors, and don't covet, don't steal. Like all this stuff is kind of laid out in front of you. And I feel like that's an ultimate shortcut that I am taking right now. So,
we talked in the beginning about like capitalism, and it's funny. I think a beautiful way to execute capitalism is if we did it through the Christian lens. And I only say that, and of course I'm a Christian, so, I'm going to sound biased, but if, back in the day, it used to be a beautiful society. Honestly, it's like people loved America and Americans because there was just something more warmer about them. Even when I go to Korea now, or I go anywhere else now, like there's like this cutthroatness that is not as apparent in America. It's way worse out there if anybody travels to Asia and whatnot.
Especially Asia. Yeah.
But I think one of the most beautiful things, and something that we actually strayed away from, is that we used to be such a generous culture. Like we used to go to our neighbors' homes. Community was such a huge thing.
Right.
That changed.
Right.
And I think that's where our society is really failing, is that just that community aspect went away. I think the Christian values is like, okay, yes, you can, work hard, get ahead and do all these things, but then also like help the people who are, not as privileged or advantaged. And that's a beautiful capitalism, is that it's a volunteer generosity to people who are not as privileged as you are, or who maybe didn't work as hard, but some people just make money better than the single woman with 3 kids, right? And it's like, how can we help people like that? And so I didn't mean for this podcast to get religious or anything like that, to be honest, but I think now that we kind of talk about it, I really do believe that, okay, to answer the question, like, how do we raise good men? Not even just good men, just good children. I think getting back into those values. Everybody loves community. Even that cult, it sounds like, that you're talking about in the documentary. It's like, they're there for, a lot of them were actually there for a reason. And one of the biggest appeals is that community aspect. It's huge. Yet where the downfall is, the broken values and whatnot. But if you truly stick with Christian values, you get the community aspect and you get the incredible influence aspect. You're also happier. I mean, you also live longer. Longevity experts have talked about living longer if you have a good community around you.
100%. Yeah.
And so maybe that is the ultimate thing. Maybe it is like one big answer is we just need to have. Maybe it doesn't have to be a Christian community, but just having some kind of
something
good, positive community probably would be better to have, like some kind of like, God in it, right? Whatever this community is surrounded around, because it's so powerful, especially if you believe in it so hard and you have this unified belief in it. But maybe that is the answer to get back into our churches. Churches have died. Like, you're seeing a degradation of a nation, but you're also seeing patterns of like, okay, we also got away from the Christian values. We're also seeing a bunch of churches close doors. And so maybe there's a correlation to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fact that you're going to fall into some sort of group or community, and it's up to you to choose if that's a good, helpful community or group versus a bad influence. I mean, again, with social media, you're already falling into something.
You're influenced by something.
You're already, I could take a look at everybody's feed and I can basically tell, okay, this person might believe this. Now you're in that community.
And it just keeps feeding you more of that.
Whatever that is.
Whether it's positive or negative.
Is it positive or negative? That is where the control and the mindset kind of comes in. But I 100% agree.
Yeah. Well, okay. I mean, there's a lot more to talk about, but let's just stop here. And again, for everybody who heard, I mean, we just please subscribe and like. It really helps our algorithm. We've been getting a few more viewers than we're used to, and we're hoping to grow. And please comment as well. That would really help us as well. But thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for coming.